Hello. It's an honor to participate in the Global Solutions Summit alongside many thought and action leaders. I want to thank the organizers and hosts for putting together such an excellent program. Even before COVID hit, there were many challenges that disproportionately affected women, whether in access to health services, the disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care and domestic work, less access than men to the internet and to digital technology, lower ownership of land and housing, and of course the disproportionate risks of gender-based violence. Many of us have been working on these issues for a very long time. But the COVID pandemic put these gaps in sharp relief and showed how fragile are the gains that girls and women have made in recent decades. Women and girls have been exposed to greater risks during COVID by virtue of the social and economic roles that have been ascribed to them, by the lack of legal protection, and by institutions that don't take full account of their needs, as well as by social norms that ascribe them lesser value. The data are clear. In health, progress in reducing maternal mortality has stalled in both low and lower middle income countries. A meta-analysis of 40 studies from very many different countries conducted over the last year reveals an increase in maternal deaths, in stillbirths, in ruptured ectopic pregnancies, and in maternal depression. Education systems around the world have been super hard hit. More than 90% of countries implemented some form of remote learning. However, at least 463 million, or 30% of school children worldwide, cannot be reached by digital or broadcast remote learning systems. Boys and girls are almost evenly represented among those who cannot be reached, but the responsibilities for different tasks for care burdens within the home makes girls at risk of higher learning losses. The headlines call the pandemic recession a she-cession, and our data support this headline. According to recent research covering 48 countries, not only was the difference in the work of rate stoppage 7 percentage points higher for women than for men, but women have been slower to return to work than men. Women-owned small and medium-sized firms have been similarly affected, with higher closures, reduced sales, and reduced profits. And this is partly because of the sectors where women work, which were much harder hit, but also because schools have not reopened for in-person instruction, and many countries lack viable child and elder care options. So women have been documented to spend, in some countries, up to 6 hours more per day than men on basic care and domestic work. Our data also reinforce that collected by others, showing increases in gender-based violence. Lost income and employment, among other factors, increase the risk of violence occurring. And increases have been documented in countries around the world, from South Asia to the Middle East to Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the OECD. But we can change this bleak picture. If we act now, we can build forward differently. Build forward to business unusual as opposed to business as usual, to put countries on a very different path to a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive future. Let me highlight 5 areas for policy action and investment: expansion of social safety nets, investment in digitalization, expansion of childcare, gender-based violence prevention, and legal reform. Starting with safety nets, the most recent data suggests that close to 80% of the population in low-income countries lack any kind of social protection coverage pre-pandemic. In the middle-income countries, this figure is around 40%. Since the onset of the pandemic, however, it has been a priority for the World Bank and other clients and partners to build social protection systems. According to our research on measures taken by 215 countries and territories, social protection measures, of which about 1/3 took the form of cash transfers, reached over 1.1 billion people, which is about 14% of the world's population. Relative to pre-COVID levels, cash transfer benefits nearly doubled, and coverage grew by 240% on average. However, workers who earn their living through informal employment, many of whom are women in urban areas, cannot rely on employment-based social protection systems. They need to be incorporated into social registries, they need to become more eligible for cash transfers, and they need more holistic support to complement the provision of cash. So scaling what we call cash plus, or multidimensional productive economic inclusion, which includes things like coaching and training and access to financial services, livelihood support, access to markets, and top-ups of cash for things like childcare, can be included as part of core economic infrastructure for countries. In Togo, for example, the Novisi program, which means solidarity, is a digital cash transfer that the World Bank developed to help informal workers during the pandemic. Women and men receive an equivalent of $20 and $17 per month, respectively, to meet basic needs such as food, water, power, and communication services. But the program goes way beyond that. It allocates more money to women, not only because they're more likely to be informally employed and outside of the system, but also because they're more likely to be responsible for families' basic needs, such as food and nutrition. Accelerating digitalization of financial services, of government and private sector payment platforms, and of services can reduce women's information and mobility constraints. So this is the second policy intervention. A starting point is women having a digital device. Many fewer women than men have access to a smartphone or to internet technology. So that's a starting point, but they also need wraparound services, such as financial accounts in their own name, and literacy programs to help them understand how to use accounts, including not just for payments, but also for savings. And they need strong institutional, legal, and technical safeguards for data protection and privacy. Digitalization, with women at the center, can be a game changer. In Pakistan, the World Bank is helping governments provide smartphones, especially to women, so they can access online training to help them launch businesses, pay for school fees, and make other transactions. Third, expanding access to affordable and quality childcare will help women and men return to work. Childcare especially helps increase female labor force participation, and it allows for higher productivity and income. Quality childcare can be a sector for employment expansion. For instance, a recent World Bank report showed that expanding the child sector and building the childcare workforce can create up to 43 million new jobs. It's time to think of childcare as economic infrastructure in the way that we think of education and health as part of that infrastructure. Fourth, scaling approaches to prevent gender-based violence and ensure services for survivors is essential. Many countries do have national gender-based violence action plans, but these are under-resourced and there's inadequate capacity for implementation. Education, health, and judicial systems to take on the shadow pandemic need to be strengthened and are critical for an inclusive recovery. Finally, a legal environment that encourages and incentivizes women's work can create economic opportunities and make women more resilient, not only in the face of crisis, but also throughout their lives and careers. The 2021 edition of the World Bank's Women, Business, and the Law report included data on measures put in place by governments to address the impacts of the COVID pandemic on working women, especially in the areas of child care, access to the court system, and protecting women from violence. This report shows that nearly 40 countries around the world have introduced leave or benefit policies to help parents with children during the pandemic. This is incredible. It shows that change is possible. Other countries took steps to provide access to justice in many ways, including declaring family cases during lockdown and allowing remote court proceedings for family matters, including incidents of gender-based violence. While there's still room to enact stronger measures to address the root causes of violence, this again shows that change is possible. Let me leave you with this final thought. While crises are hard and disruptive, they can also be periods of opportunity. The examples I have just shared with you of countries that have made reforms to promote gender equality show that change is possible. But we've been too many times before in this situation. The pandemic, with its destruction, with its loss of life, health, and livelihoods, shows that we cannot go back to where we were. We need to build forward, business unusual, with a different set of policy priorities and programs that support and nurture women's and men's agency and resilience, which is not just better for them, but also for companies and for countries. I want to wish you all the best in your conference going forward.